This story, we have a very confusing set of prompts, subcategories, headings. This story involves a false R allegation, grape. We'll call it grape, TOS. This involves a false grape allegation. It involves Muslim grooming gangs. In a very, I don't know, I just never thought this would be a story. So we've covered Muslim grooming gangs before. The long story short, they exist. Their crimes are pretty horrendous. The details of their crimes are pretty minging. They are not disproportionately represented in the abuse of children department. Not at all. It seems to be the case that sexual abuse of children is proportionally represented across all demographics. They only seem to be a bit higher in religious groups in general and in maybe immigrant groups on the grounds that the immigrant groups are younger. It's usually the case. The average immigrant is younger, and most assault of children is like committed by people who are around the age of, I think, 25 and 45. So, yeah, mostly like young men, like all crime. False R allegations are extremely, extremely rare. Convictions for them are even more rare. But this person has been convicted, been found guilty of perverting the court of justice for lying about a grooming gang. Her name's Eleanor Williams. She said she was the victim of a grooming gang and had been graped multiple times, sparking outrage and protests in her hometown. As she is convicted of multiple counts of perverting the court of justice for inventing the whole story, the BBC looks at the impact her lies had. So she was 19. She said she was like passed around by a Northern English Muslim gang. She said she was drugged. She said she was beaten up. She said she was threatened. Her hometown obviously was up in arms about this. Tommy Robinson got involved as well. Yeah, she said she had been trafficked. This is a picture of her, actually. Her injuries. But how? How could she have been found to have made it all up? Right, she said her abuse was being perpetrated by evil yet clever men who were mostly Pakistani. She outed, I think, 3 people who, I think the longest time in jail spent before they were released, I think one of them was in jail for like 73 days or something. They were all released now. Tommy Robinson was involved. Sorry, Stephen Yaxley Lennon. He promoted the protests, attended them. Apparently, Williams, Eleanor herself, said that she didn't want him involved. So she's apparently falsely accused. Well, she has been found guilty of falsely accusing people of grooming gangs, but didn't want Tommy Robinson involved, apparently. I don't know. This is one of the guys who I think was in prison for 10 weeks on remand, had to share a cell with a convicted pedophile. Was turned out to be innocent. In April 2020, after a month of fever-pitched protests, Cumbria police announced that Williams had been charged with perverting the court of justice. The following month, the force revealed that after a year-long investigation, claims of grooming gang operating in Barrow had not been corroborated. It seemed to run completely contrary to the vivid and detailed story that Williams had told on Facebook. She listed how her abusers had broken her ribs, broken bones in her face, split her ear, cut her throat, attempted to cut off her breasts, carved words into her skin, branded her, used an ashtray, dislocated her elbow, beaten me black. She said she was given drugs, nearly addicted to heroin, stripped naked, and apparently she just made this all up. Now, if you're confused about the very convincing marks on her face, well, we'll get to that. People raised over 20 grand for her. Her defense was that most of her allegations were true, except some which she had been forced to fabricate. And it looks like the nail in the coffin of this investigation is that those bruises on her face were self-inflicted. she had bought a hammer and did it to herself. This is this footage of her doing it, like buying the hammer. See that? Like, I think this is her at a bar. I think this is where she was gonna do it. She had traveled alone and stayed in a hotel. The court heard she bought a pot noodle from a nearby shop. Never trust someone who buys a pot noodle. She ate it in her hotel room, watching YouTube on her phone. How wild is that? And it looks like she's getting 8 years in jail for this because of the damage that she caused. Yeah, she said she didn't. She said anything that happened in the community was not instigated by me and my family. My family did not want Tommy Robinson in town. These are the people she accused. I think it was these two guys as well as the white guy that we saw earlier. She was found guilty of 8 counts of doing acts tending and intended to pervert the court of justice. She had earlier pleaded guilty to 1 further count. Wow. What a wow. And I just think it must be such a difficult time. It must be such a difficult time for right wingers. Because if you're a right winger, right, you must be so torn between your misogyny towards the concept of rampant false grape allegations, but also you might just want to believe it because she accused Muslims. What do you do? And I can only imagine just every single right winger just is like this guy right now, you know? Islamophobia, misogyny. I just thought that was such an insane story. I don't really have much commentary on it. It's like, because I guess the grooming gangs were never like an epidemic to begin with. The concept of a Muslim grooming gang in the UK came from a right-wing journalist who gathered 4 offenders per year over a period of 15 years. That was his data. All just press stories. And said there was an epidemic. There were 56 offenders in total over 15 years. And he said that this was an epidemic. And then the right-wing press and right-wing activists took a huge interest in it to the point that every time a Muslim grooming gang was caught, they would blast over all the headlines of the papers, even though group abuse of children is very common in the UK. There are like thousands of offenders per year for it. But every time there was a Muslim group involved, they would get all the press attention. And then the EDL and the BNP would protest in whatever town it happened in. They would trash things. They would cause sometimes like hundreds of thousands or even like millions of pounds worth of property damage. Then they'd fuck off. And then a lot of Muslims would actually get falsely accused of it. Like a Muslim guy got beaten to death once actually after the Rotherham scandal by 2 guys who accused him of grooming, even though the groomers were already in jail at that point. So it's such an insane thing. And like the Home Office released that report, which they were very hesitant to, like, they wanted to keep it out of the limelight once it was finished because it basically found that it looks like there is no disproportionate rate of Muslim grooming gangs in the UK. It seems to be the case that like for that white people are proportionally represented, Asians are proportionally represented, Black people are proportionally represented. It seems like there's no group that holds any like monopoly over sexual abuse of children. It was just bad data. And then there was the think tank Quilliam, which basically used a study where they said that 86% of grooming gangs were Muslim, even though their sample only involved like 22 Muslims per year, and they didn't even say where their data came from. It was just like a bunch of graphs with no references on it, and they didn't elaborate on their data collection. It's just so weird that like people, like, how hyper real is this story that the press sort of fabricates an epidemic of Muslim grooming gangs, and researchers and uh, the press spends like over a decade or maybe 2 decades pushing this idea that Muslims are disproportionately represented in grooming. Then a woman, a young lady, beats herself up with a hammer, accuses Muslims of doing it to get a grooming gang story out, and it turns out to be false. What is that? Life imitating art to the max. What an insane story. And I think the moral of the story here, I don't know, believe all women? Well, all bar one, seems. Blame Muslim women. There we go. That's a right-wing slogan, right? You want to get mad at the women for the false grape allegation. You want to get mad at the Muslims for doing nothing, apparently. Yeah, there we go. Blame Muslim women. Okay. Wow, what an insane story. Giga Chat, I know. I know the Chud Logic fans would like to blame Muslim women. Ironically, of course, in a sense of humor kind of way. If you can't find the decontextualized demographic crime data to support your racist dog whistles, just define your own special category of crime until you have some. Well, that's the point, yeah, because group CSC is a legal term. Turns out if you use that and try to apply it to Muslims, you get nowhere. So grooming gang is a lot more tight, a lot more obscure with the parameters and what it means. So yeah, oh, fuck. Believe them enough that you investigate the. I know what believe all women means. I'm not fucking stupid. Jesus Christ, you guys are weird. You guys are sensitive. You guys are soy. That's what I'll accuse you guys of.